way the city felt after midnight. The streets were too quiet, the air too thin, as if the whole world was holding its breath. That night, sitting alone in the back of a black SUV, he watched the blurred lights slide across the window and tried to ignore the shaking in his hands. His phone lay on the seat beside him, the last message still open. A grainy video, Emma, duct tape on her wrists, a bruise darkening her cheek. And a man's voice behind the camera, calm and poisonous. "You want her alive, Mr. Reeves? Then you'll do exactly what I say." He had replayed that video so many times that the pixels were burned into his mind. Emma's eyes, normally full of mischief and warmth, looked different there, wide, searching, trying to stay brave for the camera. She wasn't just a movie star to him. She was his friend in a world where friendships were usually wrapped in contracts and fake smiles. They had met on a charity set years ago. She had laughed at his awkward jokes. He had seen her stay hours after filming to talk to kids who had cancer, listening to them as if each one was the only person on Earth. Fame had never gone to her head. She was kind when no one was watching. That was what he kept seeing when he closed his eyes. Not a famous actress, but the girl who knelt down to tie a sick child's shoelaces because the mom was too tired to bend. The man who had her now did not believe in kindness. Everyone in Hollywood had heard whispers about him. Dario Moretti, a mafia boss who treated the city like a chessboard and people like pieces he could throw away. He owned clubs, warehouses, half the night, maybe more. Rumors said he watched John Wick once and laughed, saying, "Cute fairy tale." No one crossed him. No one refused him. And now, somehow, he had taken Emma. The police wanted Keanu to stay out of it, to let them handle the situation. But the way they said those words felt slow and empty. Keanu knew this world better than they did. He knew what it really meant when someone like Dario sent a video. He wasn't looking for money, he was looking for control. In the passenger seat, Leon glanced back at him, reading his face the way only an old friend could. Leon wasn't an actor. He was former military, a quiet man who had spent too much of his life in places no camera would ever show. He had helped train Keanu for stunt work years ago, and their friendship had grown in the cracks between fake fight scenes and real conversations. "You don't have to do this yourself," Leon said softly. "We can walk away. The more we move, the more you give him what he wants, your attention, your fear." Keanu swallowed and shook his head. "He already has what he wants, Leon. He has Emma. I'm not sitting in a trailer pretending to fight bad guys while she's out there praying someone is brave enough to be real." The SUV rolled to a stop beneath the skeleton of an abandoned bridge on the edge of the city. The air smelled like rust and wet concrete. Somewhere in the dark, a neon sign flickered from a forgotten bar, throwing sickly red light across the cracked pavement. This was the location Dario's men had given him for the first step. It wasn't a rescue point. It was a test, proof that Keanu was willing to play. He stepped out of the car and felt the cold immediately, slicing through his leather jacket, making him more awake, more present. This wasn't a set. There were no cameras, no directors yelling, "Cut!" If he made a mistake, people would bleed for real. His phone buzzed again, a new message. This time it wasn't a video. It was a single line of text, "Walk to the center, come alone." Keanu stared at the words, his jaw tightening. Fear coiled in his stomach, heavy and hot. He was 59 with a body that had taken too many hits for too many movies. His knees ached when he ran. His back complained when he lifted too much. But beneath the pain there was something that had only gotten stronger, a stubborn, quiet courage that refused to look away from suffering. He turned to Leon. "If I'm not back in 20 minutes, you leave," he said. "No hero moves, just call the contact we have and vanish." Leon's eyes flashed with anger. "I'm not that kind of friend." Keanu managed a half-smile. "Exactly, that's why I need you to be smarter than me." He walked alone toward the underbelly of the bridge, each step echoing off the concrete like a countdown. Shadows shifted ahead, 2 figures, then 3. Men in black coats stepped out from behind pillars, their faces cold, hands inside their jackets. They weren't nervous. That told him everything he needed to know about how often they did this. The tallest one, with a long scar running from his ear to his collar, tilted his head slightly. "Mr. Reeves," he said, his accent thick, amusement curling around the words. "You came, I'm impressed. Some people send lawyers." Keanu stopped a few meters away, keeping his voice steady. "Where is she?" The man with the scar smiled, revealing a gold tooth catching the stray moonlight. "Safe, for now." Another man stepped forward holding a small black tablet. He tapped it, and suddenly Emma's face appeared on the screen again, live this time, the camera shaking a bit as if someone was holding it in their hand. She was in a dim room tied to a chair. A single light bulb swung above her, throwing harsh shadows across her face. She looked tired, but her eyes were still sharp, still Emma. "Keanu," she whispered, realizing she was streaming. "Keanu, if you can hear me, don't." The screen went black before she could finish. Keanu's breath hitched, anger rushing up so fast he had to clench his fists to keep from moving. Scarman watched him carefully, studying every tiny reaction. "Dario respects courage," he said. "He also enjoys breaking it. You want her alive, you do as you're told. It's simple." Keanu's voice was low, controlled. "Why her? She's never hurt anyone. She spends her life trying to help people." The man shrugged. "We all play roles, Mr. Reeves. Yours is hero, hers is leverage." He stepped closer, invading Keanu's space, his eyes hard. "Our boss has a problem, someone he hates more than you. Someone you know. He wants a message delivered, and your face delivers messages very well. You will humiliate this man publicly, or Emma dies slowly. That is the kindness of our offer." The words crashed into him, each one clawing at everything he believed about decency, about how the world should work. Keanu had spent years trying to use his platform quietly for good, funding children's hospitals without putting his name on them, giving away millions without asking for thanks. The idea of using his fame as a weapon of cruelty turned his stomach. His whole life he had clung to humility, to the belief that no one human being was more important than another. Now his name, his face, was being twisted into a threat against someone else. Someone Dario hated, someone who might be innocent, someone who might not survive the blow Keanu was being told to deliver. Scarman slipped a small envelope into Keanu's hand, his touch almost gentle. "In here are the details," he said. "You have 48 hours. Make it public, make it brutal, make sure the world believes it, and don't make the mistake of thinking your kindness can outplay power. It never does." Keanu felt the thin paper against his palm like a weight far heavier than metal. His mind was already racing, calculating possibilities, searching for a path where no one else had to suffer. He had survived grief, loneliness, and years of being misunderstood. He had built a life on quiet resilience and a stubborn refusal to become bitter. Now all of that was being tested in a way he had never imagined. For a second, just a single fragile second, he allowed himself to close his eyes. He saw Emma's face again, the way she looked when they sat backstage sharing bad coffee and better stories, when she talked about wanting to use her voice for something meaningful. "If we have power," she once told him, "even a little bit, don't we have to bend it toward mercy?" He had agreed then. He still agreed now. But how do you bend power toward mercy when a man with a gun to your friend's head is demanding the exact opposite? As he opened his eyes, the night seemed thicker, the silence heavier. The envelope burned in his hand. Behind him, somewhere in the dark, Leon waited, unaware of the cruel choice now hanging over both of them. Ahead of him, the men began to step back into the shadows, satisfied that the trap had been set. Keanu stood there beneath the cold concrete, feeling the weight of two lives pressing down on his shoulders. Emma, and the stranger's life he was being ordered to destroy, and realized that whatever he chose next would not only decide their fate, but also who he would have to become to live with it. Leon could tell something was wrong before Keanu even reached the car. His friend's posture was different, shoulders slightly heavier, eyes staring at something that wasn't there. The quiet under the bridge felt thicker as Keanu slid back into the SUV, the small envelope still locked in his hand. Leon didn't ask right away. He just watched him, the way soldiers watch each other after a mission goes sideways, listening to the silence before the words. "What did they say?" Leon finally asked, his voice low, steady. It wasn't curiosity, it was readiness. He was already preparing himself for whatever came next. Keanu turned the envelope over once, twice, the thin paper whispering against his calloused fingers. "They want a performance," he said, almost laughing at the bitter irony in the word. "They want me to destroy someone on camera, publicly, completely. They gave me 48 hours. He looked up at Leon, eyes dark. "If I do it, Emma lives. If I don't, she dies, slowly." The words slowly stuck between them like a blade. Leon's jaw clenched, a faint muscle ticking near his temple. "Who?" he asked. "Who do they want you to hit?" For a moment, Keanu didn't answer. He pulled the envelope open with careful fingers as if it might explode. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper and a USB drive the size of a thumbnail. The paper was printed in cold, clinical font like a legal notice. A name in bold at the top, an address, a list of allegations, accusations, personal secrets, a plan of attack. They had scripted everything for him, lines of poison written for a man who had spent his life trying to speak gently. He stared at the name and his heart sank. "It's Marcus Hale," he whispered. Leon exhaled softly. The producer? Everyone in the industry knew Marcus. Brilliant, stubborn, obsessed with making films that mattered more than they made money. He had clashed with powerful men more than once, turning down dirty deals, refusing to bend. Rumors said he had recently refused Dario's investment in a movie about glorified violence and pretty bloodshed. Marcus had told people loudly that he wouldn't launder blood money through art. Now the cost of that defiance was sitting in Keanu's lap. The USB glinted under the dashboard light. "They gave me footage," Keanu said quietly. "Interviews, private moments, things cut together to make him look like a monster. Some of it might be true, some of it might be twisted. They want me to narrate it, to give it credibility, my face, my voice, so the world believes it." He swallowed hard, feeling shame crawl up his throat even though he hadn't done anything yet. Just being asked to weaponize his integrity made him feel filthy. His whole life, people had called him wholesome, pure, too good for Hollywood. Now that image was being held hostage, turned into a gun pressed against someone else's reputation. Leon leaned back, staring at the windshield, his voice suddenly sharp. "This is how men like Dario win. They make good people hold the knife. That way, even if you don't use it, you still bleed." He glanced sideways at Keanu. "We don't have to play his game. We find Emma another way." "How?" Keanu asked, the word rougher than he intended. "He's always 5 steps ahead. He has eyes in the police. He has money in hands we don't even know about. If I refuse, he kills her. If I comply, I kill someone else, at least on the inside. How do you fight someone who wins no matter what you choose?" His voice cracked on the last word, and he quickly looked away, ashamed of how much this was breaking him. In movies, moral choices were clear. In real life, they came layered with screaming faces and impossible clocks. Leon was quiet for a long moment, studying him like a man trying to defuse a bomb he'd never seen before. "You fight by staying who you are," he said finally. "Dario thinks you're just an image. He thinks he can bend you with fear, but you're not just that guy in a suit on a poster. You're the kid who grew up without much, the man who kept his feet on the ground when everyone else was flying. You've taken punches before. So we absorb this one, think clearly, and we turn his own move against him." Keanu shook his head, feeling frustration build. "This isn't a stunt scene, Leon. There are no safe words, no padded floors." He tapped the paper with Marcus's name. "If I do this just enough to make Dario believe me without breaking Marcus completely, that's still playing his game. And if I try to outsmart him, Emma pays the price. I can't use her life as currency in some clever strategy." The pain was raw in his voice now, the gentle man worn thin by the cruelty of the choice. Leon studied him, really studied him, then leaned forward, resting his forearms on the steering wheel. "What did Emma say to you the last time you had doubts about something?" he asked. "You told me once." Keanu blinked, thrown by the sudden shift. He searched his memory, pushing past the fog of fear, a late-night conversation after a charity gala. They had both been exhausted, leaning against a backstage wall, shoes off, makeup half-smeared, talking about burnout and expectation. He remembered her eyes, serious and kind. She said, he closed his eyes, summoning the memory like a fragile flame. She said, "If doing the right thing was easy, the world would already be fixed. The trick is not letting fear dress itself up as wisdom." His voice softened as the words came back. Emma had always had that way of making complicated truths sound simple. Now those same words felt like a mirror he didn't quite want to look into. Leon watched the realization flicker across his face. "So don't let fear call itself wisdom now," he said gently. "We can't be reckless, but we also can't sell your soul to a man who laughs at souls. That's not saving Emma, that's just changing which part of you dies first." There was no judgment in his tone, just a plain, steady compassion that made Keanu's chest ache. The city stretched out beyond the windshield, lights like distant stars. Somewhere in that maze of glass and concrete, Emma was tied to a chair under a swinging bulb, listening for footsteps, clinging to hope that might already be breaking. And somewhere else, Marcus Hale was probably asleep, blissfully unaware that a hurricane with his name on it had already been signed, sealed, and loaded into a man's shaking hands. Keanu took a slow breath, forcing air into lungs that wanted to collapse. "We need information," he said at last, the decision not a solution but a direction. We need to know where she is, how Dario moves, what leverage we have that doesn't cost someone else their life. He held up the USB. And we need to see exactly what he's planning for Marcus. Maybe there's something in here we can use against him without becoming him. Leon nodded once, already reaching for the ignition. Then we don't go home, he said. Too many eyes on you there. We go somewhere quiet, somewhere no one expects you to be. He hesitated, then added, I still have contacts, Keanu, people from before. They don't trust governments, but they hate men like Dario more than anyone. If we're careful, we might not be as alone as you think. As the SUV pulled away from the bridge, the weight inside the car felt as real as the engine's hum. Keanu stared at the passing city, feeling torn in half by two impossible loyalties. One to the living friend he might lose, one to the innocent man he might be forced to ruin. His whole life, he had survived by being gentle in a brutal industry, by moving quietly instead of shouting, by offering kindness even when it wasn't returned. Now the world was asking him to be something harder, colder, more ruthless, in order to save someone who believed in the exact opposite. He glanced down at the folded paper again, at Marcus's name, at the detailed instructions written by men who saw human beings as tools. A thought crept in, fragile but persistent. Maybe the only way to fight a monster who uses stories as weapons is to write a different story in the middle of his script, one he doesn't see coming, one that refuses to choose between two people's destruction. The car turned off the main road onto a smaller, darker street, heading toward a part of the city where the lights didn't shine as bright and the cameras didn't follow. Keanu gripped the USB drive tightly, the cold plastic digging into his palm, and made a quiet promise to Emma, silent but fierce. I will not let fear pretend to be wisdom. Not this time, not with you. Leon parked in the shadows behind an old brick warehouse, engine ticking as it cooled. For the first time since the bridge, the night felt still, almost calm. Keanu slipped the USB into his pocket, the decision sitting heavy but clear in his chest. Let's see what Dario thinks is the truth, he said softly, opening the door. He didn't know yet that what waited on that tiny drive would not only expose Marcus, but scrape open wounds from his own past he thought had long since scarred. And that hidden inside Dario's careful manipulation was a revelation about Emma that would shake the ground beneath his feet. Leon's safe house didn't look like something out of a spy film. It was just an old loft above a closed-down print shop, the kind of place people passed every day without really seeing. The stairs creaked, the hallway smelled faintly of dust and ink, and the door was heavy oak, scarred and solid. Leon unlocked 3 different deadbolts before they stepped inside. It felt less like entering a battlefield and more like entering someone's long-kept secret. Inside, the space was simple but lived in. A worn brown couch, a chipped wooden table, 2 metal chairs, a stack of dog-eared books in the corner next to a faded duffel bag. There were no family photos on the walls, no decorations, just a world built around function. A strong Wi-Fi router, a locked metal cabinet, and a laptop that looked ordinary except for the way Leon treated it, like a veteran treats a familiar weapon. He dropped his keys into a small ceramic bowl and nodded toward the table. Sit, he said quietly. We'll start with whatever's on that drive. Keanu slid into the chair, his back protesting as he leaned forward. He felt exhausted, but his mind wouldn't slow down. The envelope, the list of instructions, Marcus's name, everything pressed in on him at once. Leon plugged in the laptop, connected a power cable with the kind of neat precision he brought to everything. I need you to remember something before we watch this, Leon said, not looking up. Video is a knife. It cuts whatever way the editor wants it to. Don't trust what you see more than what you know. Keanu nodded, but his throat was tight. What I know, he said softly, is that Dario doesn't do anything halfway. If he put this together, it's designed to break someone. He pulled the USB drive from his pocket, turning it between his fingers for a moment like it might suddenly grow teeth. Then he handed it over. Leon inserted it into the port with a click that sounded louder than it should have in the quiet room. The screen flickered to life. A folder appeared, neatly organized, video main backup files, script. Leon glanced at Keanu. You sure? He asked. Keanu answered by reaching forward and double-clicking video main himself. The footage began with a soft piano track, clean and sorrowful. A title faded in. The Truth About Marcus Hale. Keanu felt bile rise in his throat. It looked exactly like the kind of exposé people loved to share online, the kind that destroyed reputations in a few hours. The first image was Marcus at a film festival, smiling, shaking hands, taking photos with fans. Then, slowly, the tone shifted. A narrator's voice, calm, authoritative, began to speak over clips of arguments on sets, angry emails, fragments of interviews. But what made Keanu's chest tighten wasn't what the voice said. It was what it sounded like. It sounded like him. He froze, the hair on his arms rose. The cadence, the quiet emphasis, the gentle gravity, it was his voice, except he had never said those words. Marcus Hale has hidden behind a mask of integrity, the fake voice intoned. But it's time we asked who paid the price for his so-called principles. The words crawled under Keanu's skin. The technology was flawless. Each sentence bent toward condemnation, every image carefully chosen to confirm the story being told. That Marcus was a hypocrite, an abuser of power, a secret tyrant on set. Keanu pushed back from the table, the chair scraping hard against the floor. "Pause it," he snapped. Leon stopped the video immediately. The still frame on screen showed Marcus mid-shout, eyes wild, face twisted, captured at the one worst millisecond of a moment he was sure had 1,000 other angles. Keanu ran a hand through his hair, fingers trembling. "That's my voice," he whispered. "Or close enough that nobody online would question it. They don't even need me. They already built the weapon." Leon studied the waveforms on the screen, his eyes narrowing. "It's a deepfake," he said. "High level, someone had access to hours of your speaking voice, interviews, commentaries. They fed it into a model and trained it to mimic you. Then they wrote their own script." He looked up. "Dario didn't need your cooperation. He wanted your consent. He wanted you to put your face on this, to turn a forgery into something real." Keanu sank back into his chair, the realization cutting deeper than he expected. It wasn't just about Emma anymore. This was about how fragile truth had become, about how easily a man's reputation and another man's integrity could be stolen and remixed by someone with enough money and malice. "So if I refuse," he said slowly, "he just releases this version with my fake voice, and the world believes I betrayed Marcus anyway. If I agree, I film myself saying these lies, and the world believes it for real. Either way, my name becomes his knife." Leon let the silence sit for a moment. "Look at the timestamps," he murmured, clicking through metadata, checking file details. As he worked, Keanu stared at Marcus frozen on the screen. He remembered the first time they'd met years ago. Marcus had been blunt, almost rude, refusing to flatter him, challenging him instead. "You're good," Marcus had said, "but you're safe. If you want to make something honest, you have to risk people not liking you." It had stung, but it had also stayed with him. That same stubborn man, that same unwillingness to bow, was what had likely led Marcus into Dario's crosshairs. Leon exhaled. "These files were finished 3 days ago," he said. "Dario's been planning this longer than Emma's been missing. Her kidnapping is leverage layered on top of a plan that was already in motion." He turned the laptop toward Keanu. "Click on script." The document opened. It was chilling in its precision. Lines marked K for Keanu, instructions for facial expressions, pauses, moments of genuine regret. They wanted him to narrate Marcus's fall from grace with the same quiet empathy that had made people trust him for decades. They wanted his decency to make the ugly story feel true. Near the bottom was a note in bold. "After release, Emma will be returned within 24 hours. If authenticity is questioned, consequences will be slow and public." Keanu's eyes caught on something else, a separate paragraph labeled addendum. His heart skipped. "What's that?" he asked. Leon leaned closer. The addendum laid out a second phase. If Marcus tried to defend himself, more evidence would be leaked. Financial records, audio clips, text messages, some doctored, some real. And at the very end, a single line that made Keanu's blood run cold. "If necessary, we release backup leverage. WATSON file." He read it twice, not quite understanding. "Watson file?" he whispered. Leon swore under his breath, a low, sharp sound. He clicked out of the script and opened backup files. Inside were several folders. One was labeled Hale, another was WATSON. Keanu's hand shot out, stopping Leon before he could click. "Wait," he said. His voice was tight, almost afraid. "If this is more fake garbage, I don't want to see her dragged through it." Leon met his eyes. "Or it could be why she was taken in the first place," he said. Dario doesn't waste assets. If he has something tying Emma to Marcus or to him, we need to know. You said you wanted the truth. Sometimes it's uglier than the lies, but we don't get to fight with blindfolds on." There was no harshness in his tone, just a tired honesty. Keanu hesitated, then slowly nodded. Leon opened the folder. Inside were surveillance photos of Emma, leaving hotels, getting into cars, sitting at cafes with a notebook. Most looked harmless, invasive, but not incriminating. But then came images of her meeting with people in quiet corners. A journalist known for exposing corruption, a former accountant from a shadowy production company, a young crew member who had sued a powerful executive and lost. Each photo was tagged with dates, locations, brief notes. "Too curious," one caption read. Another, asking questions about Morty accounts. At the bottom of the folder was a single PDF labeled Watson Hill Project. Leon opened it. The document was a proposal, detailed, passionate, written in Emma's clear voice. She and Marcus had been planning something together. A documentary. Not about Hollywood glamour, but about the dark money behind certain films, the strings pulled by men like Dario. It talked about art as resistance, about shining light into places that thrived on shadows. There were references to coded bank transfers, shell companies, even a few names Keanu recognized as untouchable. Keanu's chest tightened with a mix of pride and dread. "She didn't tell me," he murmured, eyes scanning line after line. "She told me she was working on something scary, something that might make people angry, but she just laughed and said, 'What's the point of being afraid of powerful men if we all agree to stay quiet?'" His voice broke on the last word. Leon leaned back slowly. "Emma wasn't leveraged by accident," he said. "She was a problem before she was a pawn. Dario needed to crush Marcus and stop their project, using you to do the first in her life to guarantee the second. That's efficiency. That's how his kind thinks." He paused, watching Keanu carefully. "You see what this means, right? This is bigger than protecting one man's reputation, bigger than one kidnapping. They're trying to erase a story that could have exposed all of this." Keanu stared at Emma's proposal at the margin notes where Marcus had pushed back, argued, sharpened her ideas. In one corner, Emma had written in all caps, "Truth without cruelty. We expose SYSDEMS, not just faces. No sensationalism." It sounded exactly like her, brave but never hungry for blood. She hadn't wanted to destroy people. She wanted to dismantle the machinery that used them. Suddenly, the choices in front of Keanu didn't feel like a simple triangle between Emma, Marcus, and his own conscience. They felt like threads in a much larger web, one that Dario had been weaving for a long time. If he did what they asked, he wouldn't just be saving Emma. He'd also be helping bury the last chance this film had to exist. He'd be proving to every silent witness watching that the cost of telling the truth was too high. The weight of that realization pressed so hard on his chest he had to stand up. He paced the small loft, hands on his hips, breathing hard. Memories crashed through him of his own losses, the people he'd loved and buried, the times life had felt like a cruel joke. He had survived those storms by holding on to something simple and stubborn, the belief that kindness mattered even when the world didn't reward it, that you didn't trade your soul, not for comfort, not for safety. But this was Emma. Flesh and blood. A person who tied shoelaces and wrote angry margins about truth without cruelty. "I can't sacrifice her for an idea," he said hoarsely. "I can't look her in the eyes if she survives and say, 'I let you die so a documentary could exist.'" His voice cracked around the word die. It tasted wrong in his mouth with her name nearby. Leon stood too, blocking his path gently, grounding him. "And if you destroy Marcus and help bury what they were building," he asked quietly, "what do you become? A man who saved his friend by teaching the world that even the good ones will eventually bow if you push them hard enough. A proof that fear wins. Is that the story you want her to wake up in?" The question hit harder than any accusation. It wasn't a judgment. It was a mirror. Keanu felt his legs weaken, and he dropped back into the chair, elbows on his knees, hands covering his face. He stayed like that for a long time, the silence broken only by the faint hum of the laptop and the distant sound of a late train passing somewhere in the city. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough but steadier. "There has to be a third path," he said, "not just save her or save him. There has to be a way to protect both without becoming Dario's puppet. If Emma were here, if she could speak for herself, she wouldn't ask me to burn another person's life for hers. She'd rather die than become the reason I broke what I believe in." He lifted his head, eyes wet but resolute. But I won't let that be the choice. Leon's gaze softened, something like respect flickering there. That's the first honest place to stand, he said. Not either or, just no. No to the rules he's trying to give you. He sat back down, fingers already moving over the keyboard. If Dario wants a show, maybe we give him one, but not the one he wrote. Keanu frowned, a frown laced with a fragile kind of hope. What do you mean? Leon opened a new, empty document and turned the laptop between them so they both faced the blank screen. We write our own script, he said. We use the same tools he's using against us, video, narrative, your public image, but we aim it at him. You can't outgun him, but you might be able to outstory him. The world trusts you. That's why he chose you. So maybe we tell the world what's actually happening. Carefully, smartly. Not enough to get Emma executed immediately, but enough to put a crack in his invincibility. It sounded insane and strangely logical at the same time. Keanu shook his head slowly. If I call him out publicly, he kills her, he said. He said as much. I'm not gambling with her life. Leon nodded. Then we don't call him out by name, not yet. We seed doubt. We expose the method without exposing the man. Deepfakes, blackmail, corrupt money in film. You speak as yourself about a pattern you've seen in the industry. You warn people about believing everything they see. We take away some of his power before he even uses it. If the audience is already suspicious when his version drops, it doesn't land as clean. A small flame flickered in Keanu's chest. It wasn't confidence. It was something more fragile, possibility. He imagined speaking directly to the camera, but not as an Avenger, not as John Wick, not as a hero with guns and vengeance. As himself, tired, honest, admitting what scared him about this moment, warning people about how easily stories could be twisted. It felt risky. It also felt right. What about Emma? He asked softly. While we're playing chess and crafting messages, she's tied to a chair, counting seconds. We can't just talk, we have to move. Leon's eyes darkened with a different kind of focus. We will, he said. While you work on the story side, I'll work the ground. I still know people who track digital footprints, who can follow the origin of that deepfake, who can trace where his goons sent those videos from. Every file leaves a trail, even if it's faint. Somewhere in this mess, he made a mistake. We just have to find it before the clock runs out. Keanu looked back at the screen, at Emma's words in the proposal, at Marcus's frozen face, at the empty document waiting for him to decide what to say. The fear was still there, thick and heavy. But now there was something else threading through it, a stubborn, quiet refusal to let a cruel man define the limits of his choices. He took a deep breath, wiped his eyes with the heel of his hand, and straightened. Okay, he said. We do both. We hunt him quietly, and we start telling a different story before he tells his. If he wants to use my voice, then I'm going to use it first. Leon nodded once, a soldier acknowledging a battle plan that was far from perfect but better than surrender. He pushed the laptop toward Keanu. Start writing what you'd say if you weren't afraid, he said, and I'll start tracing the shadow of the man who thinks nobody can touch him. As Keanu's fingers hovered above the keyboard, another thought slipped into his mind, uninvited but impossible to ignore. Dario Moretti was not just a man with guns and money. He was a man who believed stories belonged to him. And men like that only understood one thing, what it felt like when a story slipped out of their control. He began to type, each word a small act of defiance. Outside, the city kept moving, blind to the quiet war beginning in a dusty loft. Somewhere in a locked room, Emma shifted in her chair, feeling a faint, inexplicable pulse of hope in her chest without knowing why. And in another part of the city, in a room lined with expensive glass and colder men, Dario watched a live feed of Keanu entering Leon's safe house, a slow smile spreading across his face as he murmured to the darkness, "Good. Let him think he's writing his own story." The room they kept Emma in had no windows, just a concrete wall painted the color of old teeth and a single metal door with no handle on her side. The light bulb above her hummed faintly, swinging just enough to make the shadows in the corners feel alive. Her wrists burned beneath the rough zip ties, and her shoulders ached from hours of being bound to the chair. She'd lost track of time. Minutes had dissolved into something dense and formless, broken only by the sound of footsteps in the hallway and the moments when the door opened to let in another man with another demand. She had cried once, right at the beginning when they'd grabbed her outside the underground parking lot after a late meeting with a journalist. The pavement had scraped her knees, and a hand had covered her mouth so hard she'd tasted blood. In the van, hood over her head, she'd felt a scream build inside her that had nowhere to go. But the tears had dried quickly. There was a point where fear stopped being sharp and turned into something colder, something that almost felt like focus. She knew men like this. Not these exact men, but this type. Her whole secret project had been about them. The door creaked open now, and she flinched despite herself. Two guards stepped in, faces expressionless, movements efficient. Between them came a third man she hadn't seen before. Older, with silver at his temples and a suit that fit him perfectly. No visible weapons. He moved like he was visiting an office, not a prison cell. His eyes swept over her with clinical interest, like he was assessing a painting he might buy. "You're surprisingly calm, Miss Watson," he said, pulling a chair from the corner and placing it in front of her just out of reach. He sat down, crossing one leg over the other. "Most people beg by now." Emma swallowed the dryness in her throat. "You're not most people, and I'm not most people either," she answered. Her voice wobbled on the first word, but she steadied it. "Is this the part where you tell me this is nothing personal?" The corner of his mouth twitched. "Personal?" he repeated. "No, you're right, it's not. That's what makes it efficient." He studied her face with unnerving calm. "Do you know who I am?" Emma held his gaze. "Dario Moretti," she said. She had seen his name in documents, seen his shadow in bank transfers, heard his laughter in stories told in whispers. She never expected to see his eyes this close. His smile widened just a fraction. "Then you understand that this inconvenience was always going to arrive at your door. You and Marcus made yourselves very visible to people who prefer to be invisible." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I've watched a lot of people try to expose men like me. Journalists, activists, filmmakers, most of them make the same mistake. They think they're the heroes of their own story, and they forget the villain is the one holding the pen." Emma's heart hammered, but she didn't look away. "You're not a villain, Dario," she said quietly. "You're just a scared man with expensive toys. Truly dangerous people don't need to prove how powerful they are every 5 minutes." One of the guards took a half-step forward, but Dario lifted a hand and stopped him without even looking. His eyes stayed on Emma. For a second, something colder flickered there, not anger, annoyance. "You see," he said to the guard, "this is why I like actors. They learn their lines and they really commit." He turned back to her, his voice almost gentle. "Let me explain your actual role, Miss Watson. It's very simple. You are leverage. You exist, in this arrangement, to motivate a man who believes he is decent to become useful." Keanu, the thought of him flickered through her like a pulse of light. She had seen the way they dragged his name into her interrogation, the way one of the guards had held up a phone with a screenshot of his contact info, threatening to make him part of this if she didn't cooperate. She knew him well enough to imagine exactly how he'd look right now. Jaw tight, eyes heavy, guilt eating at him even for things that weren't his fault. The idea of him being pulled into this world made her stomach twist. "If you touch him," she began, but Dario interrupted with a soft chuckle. "I already have," he said, "but not with fists, with temptation, with impossible choices. You'd be amazed how much further that goes than a punch ever could." He tilted his head slightly. "Do you know what your friend is doing right now? He's sitting in a dirty loft, reading words you wrote with that producer you care so much about, and he's trying to decide whether your life is worth more than another man's name." The jab hit its mark. Emma's face paled. She had suspected they'd use her as pressure. Hearing it confirmed still hurt. "Keanu won't become your executioner," she said, forcing steel into her voice. "You misjudged him. He's not like the men you buy. He doesn't scare like they do." Dario smiled again, and this time it was almost pitying. "Everyone scares, Miss Watson," he said softly. "Especially good men. Bad men are used to blood on their hands. Good men spend their whole lives avoiding it. So when I force them to choose who gets stained, they break twice as hard." He stood, smoothing an invisible wrinkle on his sleeve. "Here is what will happen. In less than 48 hours, a story will go out with his face on it. It will say things that destroy Marcus Hale. Some of them will be true. Most of them will not. Whether the voice and the words are his or a very expensive imitation will not matter. The world will believe. The world always believes what confirms its hunger." Emma's breath caught. "And if he refuses?" she asked. She already knew the answer, but she needed to hear him say it, needed to see if there was any mercy in him at all. Dario's eyes never flinched. "Then you die," he said plainly. "Not quickly." He let that hang in the air between them, not as a threat, but as if he were listing a business consequence. "And then I release the story anyway, and your deaths become a warning instead of a transaction. Either way, Miss Watson, I do not lose." Something inside Emma snapped at those words, not her hope, but something softer, something that cared about being liked, about being gentle. She felt a strange, fierce calm rush in to fill the space it left. "You think winning is about never losing," she said. "But it's not. It's about not needing to destroy people just to feel real." She leaned forward as far as the restraints would allow. "You can take my life, you can ruin Marcus, you can even twist Keanu's image if you want. But you're making one mistake, Dario. You're forcing 3 people who care about truth to face exactly how ugly you are. People like you always overplay their hand." His expression didn't change, but the air between them did, thickened, cooled. For the first time, she saw maybe, just maybe, a flicker of irritation. "Do you believe in destiny, Miss Watson?" he asked quietly. She frowned. "No, I believe in choices." "Exactly," he said. "And you all already made yours. Marcus chose to reject my money. You chose to dig into books you weren't supposed to open. And your dear friend chose a life in front of cameras, which makes him a tool whether he likes it or not. None of you are victims of fate. You are the sum of your choices, and I am simply the one making you pay the bill." He turned to leave, then paused at the door, glancing back. His voice softened, almost conversational. "He will come for you, you know," he said. "Men like him always think they can rewrite endings. That, more than anything, is what will kill him." Then he nodded to the guards and stepped out, the door closing with a dull, final thud. Emma sat very still, her heart pounding in her ears. The guards left her alone again. The bulb hummed. Somewhere water dripped slowly, a hollow tap that kept time. She let her head fall back against the chair, staring up at the cracked ceiling. "Keanu will come for you." Dario had said it like a curse. She held it like a prayer. "Please don't do something stupid," she whispered into the empty room, as if the walls might carry the words to him. She thought of Marcus too, of his gruff patience, his endless reworking of scenes, the way he'd grumbled at her for being too idealistic, and then secretly funded a small school project she'd mentioned to him once. She couldn't bear the idea of him being smeared across headlines as a monster, when the only monsters in this story were the ones giving orders from behind tinted glass. Her mind drifted to a night months ago, sitting with Keanu on the back steps of a soundstage after a charity event. They'd watched stagehands pack away lights while they shared a stale bag of pretzels. She told him about the documentary idea then, about wanting to make something that mattered more than her own comfort. He'd been quiet for a long time. Then he'd said, "Trying to change the world when you're famous is like trying to clean a window with your own face pressed against it. You're always in the reflection. People will question your motives no matter what you do." She'd laughed and answered, "Then we just have to be so stubbornly kind they get tired of questioning." Remembering that now, she felt something hot prick behind her eyes. She blinked hard until it cleared. If they wanted to turn Keanu into a weapon, they would have to break that kindness. She refused to give them the satisfaction of imagining it. The door opened again, much sooner than she expected. This time, only one guard entered, holding a small tablet. He tapped the screen, then set it on a crate facing her. A video window filled the display, grainy, low light, like it was coming from some hidden camera. Emma leaned forward as much as she could, eyes narrowing. It was Keanu, sitting at a stained wooden table, a laptop open in front of him. He looked exhausted, lines deeper around his mouth, eyes shadowed, but very much alive. Beside him, partially out of frame, she could see the shape of someone else. Leon, probably, though she couldn't be sure. The guard hit play. It wasn't live, a recording. Keanu rubbed his temples, then leaned closer to his own screen. He started speaking, and the audio on the tablet crackled, low but clear. "If I say this," he muttered, "it sounds like an attack. If I soften it, it sounds like I'm hiding something. There's no way to warn people without sounding like I'm already guilty of what I'm describing." Emma frowned. This wasn't a message to her. This was him working through something. The guard watched her face, measuring every flinch. Leon's voice floated in from off-camera. "You're not confessing," he said. You're explaining a problem. Speak like a man who's afraid of what stories can do, not like a man trying to control them. Keanu huffed a dry, humorless laugh. I am afraid of what stories can do, he said. That's the whole problem. He paused, then straightened slowly, looking right into the laptop camera. All right, he murmured. Let's try again. He hit a key and his posture changed. Emma watched in painful fascination. This wasn't the Keanu she knew from casual moments, from quiet conversations. This was the version the world knew, calm, grounded, almost impossibly sincere. But now she could see the strain beneath it. He took a breath. Hey, he began, voice steady, eyes soft. It's Keanu. I want to talk to you about something I've been thinking about for a long time, but I didn't know how to say it. The guard paused the video, freezing his face mid-sentence, and turned the tablet toward Emma. This is a draft he recorded tonight, the guard said in accented English. Our boss gets a feed. He wanted you to see how far your friend is willing to go to keep you breathing. Emma's stomach lurched. She tried to keep her voice even. Restart it, she said. From the beginning. The guard smirked but obeyed. This time she watched every detail. The way Keanu's hand stayed still on the table, the slight tremor in his left thumb, the extra second he took before certain words. He talked about deepfake technology, about how easy it was to steal a person's voice and face. He talked about believing everything we see on screens, about how dangerous it was to assume we always knew the full story behind a clip or a headline. He never mentioned Dario, never mentioned Marcus, never mentioned her. But Emma could hear the unspoken names in every pause. There might come a time, he said, eyes burning straight into the lens, when you hear or see something with my face on it that doesn't feel like me. I'm asking you, please don't rush to judgment. Don't share it just because it shocks you. Not for my sake, for the sake of truth. Because when lies become entertaining, they become powerful. And when they become powerful, they become weapons. Emma felt her throat tighten. This wasn't a surrender. This was a warning. A shield he was trying to raise before the first arrow flew. It wasn't enough to protect Marcus completely. It wasn't enough to outsmart Dario entirely. But it was something. It was him refusing to be silent, even while trapped in a net. As the video played on, the guard watched her, pleased with the pain he saw flickering across her features. He thinks this will save you, the guard said lightly. He thinks he can talk his way around what's coming, but the shot has already been lined up. He tapped the screen where Keanu's face continued to speak. He will either read the script they wrote for him, or this warning will sound like the guilty man setting up his excuse. Either way, our boss enjoys the show. Emma met his gaze, letting her fear burn down into something clearer. You know what the funny thing is? She said, surprising herself with the steadiness in her own voice. He's not doing this to save me, not only me. He's doing it because he can't stand the idea of you winning. And men like you always underestimate how far a gentle person will go once you give them something worth fighting for. The guard snorted and reached to close the video, but before the screen went black, she caught one last glimpse of Keanu's face, mid-sentence. Please remember, the loudest stories aren't always the truest ones. Sometimes the real story is the one nobody's allowed to tell. The tablet went dark. The guard picked it up and headed for the door without another word. The lock clicked shut again. Emma sat alone with the echoes of his voice in her ears, the weight of his choices flooding her chest. He was walking a line so thin she could barely see it. From one side, the threat of her death. From the other, the temptation to erase someone else to keep her alive. She bowed her head and closed her eyes, speaking softly into the emptiness. Keanu, don't you dare break yourself for me, she whispered. If you can save us both, do it. If you ca. Her voice trembled, but she forced it steady. If you can't, then don't let him turn you into something you're not. I'd rather die than watch you disappear inside his story. As if answering, a faint sound reached her through the walls, distant at first, then a little clearer. A low hum, an irregular clicking. She frowned, listening. It might have been an air conditioner, it might have been pipes, or it might have been something else entirely, something mechanical, moving where it shouldn't be. On the other side of the city, in Leon's loft, a narrow window of code flashed across the laptop screen. Leon leaned forward, eyes narrowing as he watched a string of numbers and coordinates resolve into a single, blinking dot on a digital map. He checked it 3 times, cross-referenced source IPs against burner towers and known Morty properties. His pulse quickened. Keanu, he said quietly, breaking the heavy silence where his friend sat, rewriting and re-recording his message for the 7th time. Stop for a second. I think we just found a crack in his wall. Keanu turned, hope and dread warring in his tired eyes. What kind of crack? He asked. Leon zoomed in on the map, the blinking dot locking onto a grim, industrial part of the city. The kind that talks too much when it thinks nobody's listening, he said. One of the devices feeding Dario live footage from his holding sites just slipped. For about 3 seconds it answered a ping it shouldn't have. I caught a tail. Keanu stood slowly, the chair scraping back. His knuckles whitened as he gripped the table. Is it her? He whispered. Leon, is that where they're keeping Emma? Leon's fingers flew over the keys, pulling up satellite overlays, building schematics, security grids. The layout that emerged on the screen made his face harden. If this data is right, he said, then whatever's in there isn't just her. It's a nest. Cameras, servers, backup drives, everything Dario needs to keep his little ecosystem of lies alive. He turned the laptop so Keanu could see the building's faded outline and the cluster of red dots marking surveillance points. If we go in there, Leon said, voice low and deadly serious, we're not just rescuing Emma, we're stepping straight into the heart of his story machine. Keanu stared at the map, at the coordinates, at the tiny blinking dot that might be the closest thing to a path out of this nightmare. His fear didn't disappear. It sharpened. But beneath it, something ancient and stubborn rose, older than his career, older than his fame. The simple, human refusal to let cruelty decide the ending. We go, he said quietly. Leon's jaw tightened. Then we need a plan that gets you both out alive, he replied. Because if we're wrong about this place, Keanu, walking through that door might be the last choice you ever get to make. Leon's plan sounded less like a movie and more like a math problem someone could die solving. They spread blueprints and satellite images across the old wooden table, the dim loft light casting long shadows over lines and numbers. The building was an old canning factory on the edge of the city, converted into storage if you believed the false business registry. The thermal scans Leon's contact had pulled showed pockets of heat, too regular for abandoned machinery, too concentrated for rats. Human bodies, computers, power sources. Leon tapped a red dot on the diagram. This is where the signal slipped, he said. 3rd floor, inner room, heavy insulation, one direct fiber line, that's your story machine. That's where he's keeping the feeds and backup drives, and most likely Emma. Keanu studied the map, jaw clenched. How sure are you? 70%, Leon answered. Maybe 80. He met Keanu's gaze. If we wait, I can get it to 90, maybe higher, more scans, more cross-checks. But every hour we wait, the clock on her life keeps ticking, and Dario gets closer to launching that video about Marcus. Keanu shook his head. No more waiting, he said quietly. His voice was tired, but there was steel in it now. Dario already thinks he owns time. I'm not giving him any more of it. Leon watched him for a heartbeat, then nodded once. Then we go with what we have. He pointed to a side entrance on the blueprint. We hit here. It's an old loading dock, least visible from the street. 2 cameras, both hardwired. I can loop their feeds for a few minutes from here. He gestured to his laptop. But once we're inside, we're in his house, and in his house he moves faster. Keanu glanced at the pile of gear Leon had laid out. 2 earpieces, a compact pistol, a thin coil of wire, flash drives, a knife with the edge honed to a whisper. He felt a strange dissonance looking at it all. He'd spent half his career surrounded by prop guns and rubber knives, by choreographed violence and careful illusions. This looked small, real, heavy. I'm not a soldier, he said quietly, almost apologetically. You know that. Leon's gaze softened. No, he replied. You're something more dangerous to a man like Dario. You're a decent man with nothing left to bargain with. That makes you unpredictable. He pushed the knife toward him. You take this. You stay behind me. You do exactly what I say. And if I tell you to run, you don't stop to argue. Keanu picked up the knife. It felt cold and honest in his hand. If you tell me to leave you, he said, meeting Leon's eyes, I'm going to ignore you. A corner of Leon's mouth twitched. Yeah, he said. I figured. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small, weathered patch, faded fabric with a symbol Keanu didn't recognize. He held it for a moment, then set it back down. You know, he murmured, the last time I went into a building like this, I told myself I was doing it to protect my country. He looked up. This time, it's just for two people I care about. Feels cleaner. They drove without music, the city sliding past in a blur of lights and late-night ghosts. At one point, stuck at a red light, Keanu's phone buzzed. A new email. Subject line, draft ready. It was from a burner address, but he didn't need to check the metadata to know it was from Dario's people. He stared at it for a long second, then hit select and deleted it. Leon saw his thumb move. You sure? He asked. Yes, Keanu said. I sent my own message hours ago, the video warning. If that's not enough to crack his story, no draft I give him will be. I won't feed his machine. Leon nodded, saying nothing more. Sometimes the bravest choices were the ones no one would ever see. They parked 3 blocks away from the old factory, slipping into the night on foot. The air smelled like oil and wet metal. The building loomed ahead, its broken windows like watching eyes, its rusted sign half-hanging. Up close, it looked exactly like what it pretended to be, abandoned, forgotten. But Leon's gaze flicked to tiny details. The glint of new screws on an old door, the nearly invisible shimmer of a camera lens, the faint hum of too steady electricity. He touched his earpiece. Audio check, he whispered. Keanu's reply came through his own earpiece, soft but clear. I hear you. Stay low, stay close, Leon said. And whatever you feel, breathe through it. Fear makes people loud. They reached the loading dock. Leon knelt by the security panel, a cheap, lazy cover over a much more expensive system. His fingers moved with practiced ease, bypass, loop, override. Inside the loft, his laptop, remotely linked, mirrored the system and sent back the same harmless frame of an empty alley over and over. We've got 4 minutes of blindness, he murmured. After that, they'll see everything. Go. They slipped inside. The first floor was mostly empty, a graveyard of old machinery and dust. Their footsteps were almost noiseless on the concrete. Leon moved like he'd been born in shadows, every step measured. Keanu followed, hyper-aware of his own breathing, the way his heartbeat seemed too loud in his ears. This wasn't a set. If someone stepped out with a gun, there was no stunt coordinator to shout, cut. At the far end of the hall, Leon pointed upward, a metal staircase. 2 guards mid-landing, he whispered. Heart's beating too fast to be asleep. Keanu blinked. You can hear that? Leon gave a non-committal shrug. Feel it, he said. Stay here. Before Keanu could argue, Leon was gone, melting into a band of shadow, reappearing behind one of the guards so suddenly it looked like a cut in a film reel. There was a muffled thud, then another. 2 bodies lowered gently to the ground, unconscious. Leon motioned. Come. As they climbed, the air grew warmer, the hum of machinery more distinct. On the second floor, they slipped past a door with the muffled sound